Galin here with the Chatham Journal, Chatham Chat List. We are at the home of Tim Moore. And who is Tim Moore? Tim Moore is a candidate for the Board of Education. He's running up against Gary Leonard this year. It's 2022. We're sitting here on a Saturday morning in the home of Tim Moore. We've got his wife Kim standing by the sidelines. You may hear her chime in every once in a while. His son David said, "I'm not talking," which is fine with me. I can understand that. Although it is parents' job sometimes to embarrass their kids. All right, Mr. Tim.
Good morning.
Good morning. Let's start off with the question I'm sure everyone asks you is, why are you running for Chatham County School Board?
Oh, thank you. Well, I think the reason I'm running for the school board, and I've never run for political office ever, never even really gave it a lot of thought, but I came to the understanding in roles and jobs that I had over the last 20, 30 years, certainly over the last 10 years, that we are losing some of the skill sets that our youth need around reading comprehension, writing, and mathematics. And I started looking, I don't know, maybe like 2-3 years ago at data to see if my suspicions are correct. And according to a lot of researchers, we're way behind all three of those elements against most countries of the world. We're not even in the top 20 of any of the industrialized countries. So, and matter of fact, there's even some unindustrialized countries that are ahead of us. So obviously I think there's a need in the education. I think that's why it's a very hot topic today. I think people are more interested in what's going on with our youth, what's going on with our future, because they are the future of our country, and how do we close that gap that we see in the data? How do we get those three elements for sure? And you could throw science in there also. How do we get our youth up to a level where they can at least compete on a global level?
So is this you running here in Chatham County? Is this your effort to improve your little part of the world?
Absolutely. And you know, it's been said many times, and I don't think I understood it as well as I do maybe in the last few years. But politics is really, if we call it politics, really it should be service, is more on a community level. I'm not going to change the United States. I'm not even thinking, you know, that I could change even North Carolina. But if I can change my community, if I can at least have an influence in my community, I've done some part there. It takes a lot of people to go change a country. One or two people can have an influence in your community.
All right. Now, you mentioned that we're not doing too well when you compare us to a lot of parts of the world.
Right.
And I think that brings me up to the question. You have actually had an opportunity to travel a bunch. I see that you were, you were born in Texas, left the U.S. when you were 5, lived in Latin America until college. So that's a huge bunch of years. Panama, Honduras, Colombia, and the Dominican Republic.
Correct.
How have those years between the age of 5 and you going off to college affected your view or your perspective of education in the world?
Well, I saw even in some of those countries how much parents valued education. In the Dominican Republic, the school I went there, all the parents were involved. It was a private school, but people were very much involved and cared about what was going on in their education. The school that I went to in Bogota, Colombia, an international school, kids from all over the world, very highly competitive in terms of school classes. Had half my classes in Spanish, half of them were English. I think I learned about Rubén Darío before I learned about Mark Twain. But that kind of international focus shows that the rest of the world is very, very focused on results and getting what they can out of education.
Yeah, we're going to touch on results a little bit later on here. And then after college, you went ahead and joined the Army. You were stationed in Italy and Germany, and I asked you this question before we started talking. You were primarily with the 82nd Airborne. How many times did you jump out of a perfectly good airplane?
Well, I never jumped out of a perfectly good airplane. I remember the planes I was in. I was really glad to get out of them because it seemed like you know, I don't know if you've ever been in an Air Force aircraft, but that's not like going in United Airlines.
No,
you see all the hydraulic lines and you see the lights, and it's very noisy. Obviously, it's not soundproof, so you know, it can be a little bit stressful, especially the way Air Force flies sometimes. Like, I can tell you a story. We jumped in Germany and we started in Italy and we flew over the Alps. And pretty much 80% of the flight was called Nap of the Earth. That's when you're flying literally, I don't know, 300 or 400 feet above the ground, which means you're like in a popcorn machine the whole way for 3.5 hours. So, I was glad to get out of those planes. I mean, I appreciate the airports getting us there, but I was ready to get out when that door opened.
All right, and you were with the Army for 8 years, is that
8
correct?
years, yep.
8 years.
And then you asked me, I had 30 jumps in total, I think, 30 or 31,
jumps.
if I remember correctly.
I assume they were all perfectly good jumps because you're here.
Yep, I walked away. That makes a good jump.
There you go. Let's backtrack to the involvement, parent involvement. There seems to be a small group of people that seem to be, oh my gosh, parent involvement, we need to put kids first. Let's go back to that parent involvement. What was the parent involvement that you saw when you were growing up, going to all those different schools? What specifics were involved with parent involvement?
Oh, I remember my dad would be called up and brought in, not because of any problem, but wanting input from the parents, and they'd tell them about the curriculum they were going to teach. They had influence in terms of what they thought the kids should be thinking about and looking at. My dad, an international person, he would give his input and say, hey, by the way, you need to think about these sort of things because this is what we're seeing in the world. So that was a very important piece. The idea that parents should have some say in the education and at least have some influence in what's going on in the curriculum, because obviously, one, it's their children. Two, a lot of parents have different backgrounds, whether it's business or social engagements. They see things in the world that probably maybe not educators see every day because they're not in that fraction, but their parents certainly do. They can come in and influence that.
How did the school administrators react to that input from the parents?
Oh, they encouraged it. It was positive. Doesn't mean they took everything, but at least they heard the parents and said, hey, that's interesting, knowing again that they have a different environment than the administration has. They took that, and sometimes they said, yep, we can do that, or sometimes they say, no, we can't really fit that into our curriculum, but they were very appreciative of that input.
Now, you've attended several Chatham County School Board meetings, and I believe on a September meeting, which I believe was September 9th, and we have a video of you up on YouTube, you chose to come up and speak at that meeting during your 3-minute public input session. There were 10 speakers, or you were one of the 10 speakers. Can you reference what some of the things are that you brought up as points during that presentation?
Oh, for sure. So one of the things is, again, it's focused on how do we get better results on academics around the reading comprehension, the writing, and math that we're not achieving. We're not seeing that today. Clearly today, the board itself really wants to laud what the results are, but we still have almost half of our students that cannot graduate at grade level on those 3 elements. And it gets worse. If you look at it by racial groups, 70% of the blacks and 60% of the Hispanics, if my memory serves me right, can't achieve those grade levels. So we need to go back and focus on academics. There's a lot of social engineering, there's a lot of politics that are being discussed in school. What we need to focus on to help our youth is to get those 3 elements down. And yes, later we maybe or should probably also focus on science. But without those 3 things, we are not going to be competitive in the global economy. And I'll give you an example. And this really kind of brought it up to me probably about 6 years ago. I was working for a company and we needed some industrial engineers. So I was part of a group of interviewers, and we went down to NC State and we interviewed 25 engineer graduating candidates. They were all getting ready to graduate, so obviously they're all looking for jobs. Of those 25, and again this is NC State, arguably or maybe not arguably, the premier engineering school in the state. Of the 25, 21 were foreign born. And the 21 that were foreign born, many of them had advanced degrees already. They already had MBAs, they had masters in applied sciences and other elements, so they were highly qualified. And 4 were U.S. born students. And of the 4 that were U.S. born students, I remember I think it was 2 or 3 of them weren't sure they were going to graduate in engineering. They hadn't made up their mind yet. The 21 that were foreign born, they were already, many of them had internships at large corporations and done project work and were ready to go onto the line. So that really kind of highlighted, and I said, well, that's really telling when you got 21 and 25 of foreign born. Not that I have any issue. Of course, we always want to be a good bastion of schools that people want to come to. But that weighted side to so many that were foreign born and so few that were U.S. born made me think, wow, this is a need. We're falling behind the rest of the world. It's no surprise to anybody, but if you look at the doctors that we have, many of them, I don't know what percentage, but a lot of them were foreign born. A lot of our engineers that we have working at our companies, in your industry, as you know, in the hardware and software side, many are foreign born because they come and they're very, very educated and they have that high skill set. remember that many of those 21, English was a second or third language, and they had already, they advanced beyond that and already were in advanced degrees in U.S. schools. I had one the other day that my current employer had 2 master's degrees, one from Columbia, one from William and Mary, one in applied science and one in analytics, and also has now a engineering degree from NC State. And again, she's Chinese, and she probably speaks 3 Chinese languages along with English, right? So we are falling behind on the global market when you look at what our skill sets are. And the only way we're going to get back to that is academic focus.
So you're looking at this a little bit differently than somebody who may have been born in Chatham County. Who's kind of looking at it from a Chatham-centric perspective. You're looking at it from, hey, I've lived outside the country for a multiple number of years. I've also been in an environment where I'm hiring folks, and I'm hiring folks from all over the world who had been educated here. And so what you're feeling, what kind of specifics, and I think one of the things that you had mentioned is that also folks need to look at non-traditional college paths, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. What are some of the things you think Chatham County should be doing better from in the school board perspective? Because I think you mentioned there's certain things like politics, social justice issues, and other issues that kind of seem to take away from the things that you want to be able to have our kids be able to do.
Absolutely. So when you look at what's going on in the school boards all across the country, right? We're getting a lot of social focus, let's say social change, social reengineering, that really isn't going to help those students, right? That whether you understand the difference between equity and equality, nobody's going to ask you that in an interview. They're going to ask you, things about your applied science skills, your English skills, and ask you questions about how you solve problems. That's not where this education system is going. This social reengineering is not helping our students. They don't get that in those other countries. Now you can say, well, maybe they should, they shouldn't. But bottom line is they're much more competitive in the hard skill sets, academic skill sets, than our students are. So that's something we need to really get away from and focus on those elements. And the other thing I'm strongly encouraged of, I did some research, right? So I wonder, how do these other countries kind of get ahead? And I give one example, a couple that I know, but one for sure is Japan. Japan, average kid goes to school from 8 to 6. 8 to 6, not 8 to 3. Now, they do mostly academics up till 3 o'clock, but then from 3 to 6, they're either doing clubs, or they're doing remedial training, or they're working on other, on weaker parts of their education, or they're doing sports or whatever, but they're in school from 8 to 6. And some of that time is, for those that need it, is more academic focus. So that, and they, by the way, their students go to school about 280 days out of the year, 100 days more a year than our students do. And the reason they do that is they're trying to build a youth that is competitive in the marketplace. Now, you mentioned the thing about non-college kind of bound education. Well, I think we saw that in Germany. We lived in Germany, and we saw that. German schools are kind of broken up into 3 levels of high school. There's one level of high school that is extremely hard academic, and that's where you're probably a lot of your PhDs and your hard science graduates are going to come out of. And they determine that based on testing and skill sets, right? The middle school is probably more like they're going to be white collar or maybe supervisors or managers, and they go into that kind of school set. And the last one is more trades oriented. And what those students do is probably about their freshman or sophomore year, half of their academic day is at a factory. And they're apprenticing to get to where when they graduate, they go right onto the line. They're a full apprenticed line worker or plumber or steam fitter or whatever's needed. And they go right from high school right into a full-time career, certainly making better than $12 an hour. And I think we can do that. We have trade weaknesses in this country. We've got a shortfall. I can tell you the industry I'm in, we have a bunch of engineers that are aging out. And we don't have a lot of engineers that are ready to come in and take over those roles. We need to refocus on those elements that are very important to us. The trades are extremely important to us. That's how the roads are going to get built, the infrastructure that we want to go invest in. If we don't have people that have the skill set to go do that, we're going to be hiring people from overseas to come in and do that and wonder, well, why do we do that, right? It's because we haven't really focused on that.
Well, aren't the trades also, some of the positions you mentioned, those are also things that are not going to go overseas. If anything, you're going to bring in people to be able to do that. But if you're in a trade position and doing those functions, you pretty much are going to do pretty well here in the U.S., aren't you?
Absolutely. Now, So one of the things I think, and I may not be popular on all sides of the aisle, but one thing I think we definitely need to do, we need to pay our teachers more. And I'll give you an example. Our teachers right now, at least the last data I saw, starting teacher makes somewhere around 55,000. I may be up or down, but Chatham's I think somewhere in there. You know what a starting truck driver makes with 8 weeks of training, of CDL training? Start $80,000 a year. $80,000 a year, a truck driver, with just a high school diploma and 8 weeks of CDL training. And yet we send teachers to college for 4 years, get them, education certified, and we pay them $55,000 a year. That's an inequity. What's happened is the needs of those, and if you know some plumbers or some electricians, they make a lot more money than they did 10 years ago. The wage of skill set has gone up by education. And again, we say we recognize our education, that we admire education, but we don't put any money into it. We've got to pay our teachers better for sure, and get them, that way people have a desire to go into that field. At the same time as we do that, we need, again, that needs to be academic focus. We need to have a skill set in our youth that can make them more competitive and be able to go out. And there's nothing that says that you graduate high school, you really can't do anything but work at McDonald's because you don't have any skill sets if you're not going to college. If we have those trade schools and they've already got an apprenticeship, say with VinFast or Wolfspeed, they go right into a $55,000, $60,000 a year job that they, that they can at least provide for their family. They can, I'm not saying that's what they want to do all their lives, but they can at least provide for their family. If they want to go to night school and get advanced degrees and go on, they could certainly do that. But if you don't give them at least a decent working man's wage, it's going to be a struggle in our economy.
So basically, it sounds like the pathway to success here in the U.S. isn't just through college. It sounds like, hey, we need to have a pathway to success for our young people through other options besides college.
Absolutely, and if you look at the big move, we're trying to bring, manufacturing and factory jobs back to the U.S. We're going to have the skill set that can do that, and we went away from it for many, many years, decades really, and now we want to bring that back, but we don't have a workforce that's ready to do that. Well, at least we don't have we'll call it high school graduate force that's ready to do that. And other countries have conquered that many years ago, and they do that on a regular basis. We need to do that also.
All right, that sounds like a national type of issue that affects everyone here in the U.S.
Right.
What can you do, or what kind of things can we be doing here in Chatham County to be able to affect it? As you mentioned, WinFast is coming in.
Yep.
You've got the chip manufacturer coming in. There may also be another opportunity coming in over the horizon.
Yep. Yeah, and I think what we need to do is on the board representative should meet with that company, VinFast, and they say, hey, you're hiring 7,500 people. Do you know where they're coming from and what skill sets you need? Because we can do that. We can actually, you help us. You bring your engineers in, whatever it is, once or twice a week or whatever you can afford, and we'll set up the training, and you'll have a full, ready skill force when you're ready to open up your plant. Same with Wolfspeed. Same with any of them. And I've worked with companies that did that. And if you say that to them, they'll know. They're not stupid. They know, okay, I've got to hire a bunch of people. Right here we got a chicken plant, and they still bust people in from Greensboro every day because they can't find enough workforce in the area. If you set that up with them and you say, hey, we'll provide you a teaching space, we'll have the students ready, we'll be ready to go, they would be extremely interested in that.
And also, how do you feel the relationship with the community college should be? Is the school board doing, or Chatham County Schools doing enough with the Central Carolina Community College?
Well, that's what they'll say. They'll say, okay, we're going to work with the community college to have them go do that. But number one, community college isn't always free, right? Where if I went to college, to get a certain kind of diploma and go do something. Community college is good. It's a first step. It's a way to get ahead. But if we can teach them in high school, why do we throw it onto the community college to go do that? High school graduates don't necessarily, I'm coming out, I'm 18, I need to get to work. Why do I have to go now to a community college for 2 years, pay for some of that out of my pocket when I could have got that training in high school? So yes, I think, yes, community college can do some things. Maybe the community college is the next step. So while they come and they're working on the factory line, the community college should be really teaching them management skills so they can move into management once they have those skills. But to work onto an assembly line, you don't need to go to community college for that. That you should probably be able to do right out of high school. Management training, leadership training, supervisor training, they could get that in the community college.
All right, let's talk about the bumps in the road in the pathway of just life. And we're going to talk about one of your failures.
Mm-hmm.
One of your failures was, and you said it was probably the best thing that happened to you in your life. I think your wife would say the best thing that happened in your life was getting married to her, but we'll talk about that later. You mentioned that you played athletics,
right,
and you had to sit out a year because you weren't very good at doing what you were supposed to be doing in school.
Absolutely.
Why don't you elaborate on that and tell us how that failure turned out to be a good thing for you?
Absolutely. So I'd be readily first to admit that I wasn't always the best student from the get-go. I needed motivation like many students do. Our students need it today sometimes. And I was a good athlete. I was a three-letter sportsman in high school. And I went to college and I played, as I grew up internationally, I played a lot of soccer. So I played soccer in college. And again, I like many youth, I went to college not necessarily having a dream as to what I wanted to do. I just said, well, I'm going to go get a business degree. I'll find a job after college, but I'm here more for the environment. And I played soccer, and I kind of let my grades slide, and that was not good. And I paid for that. I remember my coach telling me, "Hey, I can't have you play this year because your grades aren't achieving what they need to be. You'll have to sit out." That's powerfully motivating. It tells me that I had to buckle down and really get back to my studies. I took an academic year off in semester in college, and I had to come back and go to summer school, get my grades back up, and refocus on education. And it made me a better student out of all that. But it also taught me that the focus that I need to have at that time, and I remember meeting with my business counselor. I said, I've really got to understand some of these principles around business, whether it's macroeconomics or it's accounting and all these principles that I use in my job now, that I needed to focus on that, because if I didn't have an understanding to it, I would have a hard time, really being successful.
Let's talk a little bit more about athletics. I've covered sports over 20 years, and I have found that most students who participate in extracurricular activities, whether it's athletics or band or anything else like that, usually do better in school and in life. It seemed that was the case in your growing up, in your involvement. You did mention, I think, and I don't know if it was somewhere where you said that the schools are paying too much emphasis on non-academic awards.
Right.
You mentioned the athletic teams that
Right.
the women's basketball team at Northwood was honored, and several other things. What are you proposing? Because it sounds like sports was good for you. I've seen it good for a lot of kids.
Right.
You hear the bad stories, but there's a lot of good that comes from kids being involved in things out of school.
Right. And
what were you proposing when you brought that up?
Well, a couple things. So yes, I played sports, and yes, I think sports teach you a lot of things. Teach you about leadership, being part of a team, focused on a goal. Those are very important elements, but they can't substitute the academics that you need to come out of a school, right? So, and like I said, my school was very strict on it. If you didn't have the academic level, then you sat out. I don't know how much of that's going on today. I don't know if that's really happening. That if that were the case, I would say almost 50% of the school couldn't participate in sports because they can't read and write math at level. So my suspicion is that's not really being followed as closely as it should be. So back to the athletics. I think athletics are important, but I think if we really say we value academics, then we need to value academics. Do you know who the highest paid state employee in Alabama is?
No, but I'm sure you're going to tell me.
Nick Saban. Nick Saban probably makes $5 to $6 million a year. Now, I have nothing against Nick Saban. He's a great coach. There's many great coaches. I'm sure our coaches in UNC and NC State make millions. But do we really think their responsibility, their jobs are more important than the governor? Really? So we can't say we value academics if we're just throwing a lot of money and a lot of focus in athletics. Athletics are important, absolutely. But at some level, it becomes more of an entertainment than it does in terms of giving you the desired skills that you're going to need in life. So I think we need to get back to that. If we say we value academics, we need to value it. On a local level, in the board, I've been to now 11 board meetings. I've never seen a student brought up to say, hey, we'd like to recognize Gene. Gene, came in and he started out, he came to the area, he wasn't the best student. Now he's in the top 10 in his class. I mean, not even the valedictorian. Recognize students for moving and achieving, just like we do in our sports. I've been there, I've seen, 20 or 30 sports teams got brought forward. I mean, bring the student forward. Let Gene be recognized for the hard work he's done academically. And as long as we're in that, right, as long as we're in that role, we say, well, we value academics. Gene could be a 4.0, almost valedictorian. Gene goes to apply at a school. Gene will only get a portion of that school paid for. They're still going to pay a little bit out of pocket. Now, Gene's a 4-star or 5-star athlete. He not only does he not pay for anything, he lives in a special dorm. He has a special gym. He has a nutritionist that comes in and says, hey, Gene, you lay off the pizza today. We got practice. Why don't we have that for our academic students? Hey, Gene, you got a physics test today. You may want to load up on some pizza so you have some energy, right? We don't do that. So we can't say we value academics at the same level that we do athletics. And again, I don't really have anything against athletics, but we need as a country to say we're going to put academics first with our youth so they have a chance. By the way, those numbers that I gave you before, that's only further worsening what's going on in our society, because you have such a percentage that can't read, write, and add. They're going to have a hard time competing in any job, right? We have to refocus that. We have to say, we're going to stop all the silliness. We're going to focus on academics. My feeling is we should have a goal of 85% across all ages, all races, all ethnic groups that can graduate at that level, right? Now, you could say 85 is too low, but it's certainly a lot better than 50% that we're seeing right now. So I think if we do that, if we focus on that, and I mean, to me, it's the golden hours, right? I get you got school 3 to 5, or even maybe 3 to 6. We should have tutoring going on for those students that aren't achieving, and it's free. We supplement it. We, instead of spending $11 million on a warehouse and an office, we spend that on tutoring. That'll pay for a lot of tutoring. That would improve those scores right away.
Yeah, let's talk about that $11 million. Again, folks, we're jumping around here. We're just going with the flow. It's more of a conversation than an interview process. You mentioned $11 for a new warehouse. That actually not a new warehouse. It's for the new office headquarters.
Right.
So you're kind of like saying, I mean, have you been to the old administrative building?
I have.
All right.
And the door worked. I saw the door worked. I was in there in the summer. The air conditioning was fine. I didn't see rain coming through the roof. I'd have a hard time understanding how that's going to help us academically when we go spend money on an office.
All right.
Now, great. You got extra money. You got all those things done. You're at 85%. You got some money. Fine. Let's go do an office and a new warehouse. But until we get those things done, we don't go spend money on office buildings. We don't build a big sports complex out in a forest. We need to focus on academics.
All right, so that you actually gone ahead and answered the question I was going to ask. You're looking to spend that money more towards, I think you mentioned adding new teachers and adding professional tutors.
Yes, absolutely. And by the way, there's probably a lot of retired teachers, and I did the economics. So if you looked at it, you took that $5 million and you took maybe 200 or 300 of the lower performing students. You pay that tutor $100 an hour. I think a lot of teachers will stay in for $100 an hour. I think a lot of retired teachers probably come out for 10 hours a week, or I guess it'd be 20 hours a week for $1,000 a week. A lot of professional educators would probably jump on that. And why is that important? Because that's going to make the difference. And I'm talking 3 students to a tutor, right? You get 2 hours a week, 2 hours a day, 10 hours a week, and you do that through the whole semester. You're going to see better grades. I mean, again, I'm not providing that there's anything incredible there, but I know if you work harder and you put more time to it and more element, you'll get a better result.
So you're talking about building a better support system, not just for the student athletes, but overall all students, and help that lower level of students perform better so that you can achieve your 85% goal.
Absolutely.
All right. I am going to go back to athletics because I think one of the things I've seen both, not just in Chatham County, but in high school sports and also in college sports, there's a lot of single-family homes. I don't know the percentages, but I've also seen where athletics, and it sounds like athletics was good in your life in that it kind of set you on the pathway to success. I see where a lot of coaches spend a lot of time, a lot of good coaches, and they're the surrogate parents sometimes. What's your feeling on the role of sports coaches in the school system?
Oh, absolutely. I think a coach should be a mentor to that student, and not just in that athlete, not just, hey, I need you to do better in sports or in this, this given sport that we're playing, but I need you to also think about your life and how you're going to do in your life. Understand that, I don't know what the percentage is, it's minute, how many that play sports go on to make a living out of it, right? The idea of sports is to really, like I say, camaraderie, team sports, goal focus, those are very important. But it should also be done in conjunction with, hey, you've got to get your grades. You've got to be able to achieve these things. Now, when you go into the workforce, yes, those sports experiences that you have are going to help you with all you're working with your coworkers. Absolutely. But if you don't have the academics to be able to communicate well, to write out your ideas, and to be able to use math in your daily work, you use math in your work. I use it every day. Spreadsheets all the time, right? We live with that between PowerPoint and spreadsheets. But if you can't do that, it's going to be hard, and that's where the coach can really make a difference and say, yeah, I love your enthusiasm, I love your hard work. I need you to apply that same sort of enthusiasm and hard work into your academics.
All right, folks, we're at the 30-minute mark. I think we're still rolling here. We still haven't hit on all of Tim's priorities, so I'm going to go back to it. One of the first priorities you have is that your first priority is to listen to parents whose children have been taught in the public school system in Chatham County. You believe when a school board places their own beliefs above those of the parents, and that school board ceases to be efficient.
Right.
Let me just build on that. Is one of the things you're proposing is to create a parents board. So let's talk about the inefficiencies you see in the school board,
Right.
and how the parents board might help alleviate some of those concerns.
Right. So let's because I know there's a lot of emotion around that, right? By the way, that is the second most important guideline to what the board has right now. The first is academic success. The second, in their guidelines, their own published guidelines, is parent involvement. We need to allow the parents to be involved. So I'll give you an example of kind of their way that they say they do it. They have these advisory boards that they built. And what they did is they brought a bunch of teachers together and administrators, and then they bring on a parent. One parent per school that is picked by the administration. I'm not sure I really see that as a whole lot of parent involvement. That's one voice. One voice that is picked by the administrators that probably says, hey, let's pick Mrs. Jones because she agrees with everything we say. What we need is a parent advisory board that is picked by the parents who are there to really understand what are the topics, the needs that they have, and have a voice into that. The other element is this idea that parents shouldn't really be involved or have any say in what is taught. Well, number one, let's go back. These are the parents. The children belong to the parents, right? Not the school. The institution of education is there to educate, but the parents are the parents. They're involved in the overall welfare of their child. And if we don't have that involvement, then parents are going to feel like we're left out. And I think that's what we're seeing across the country is they feel like we're left out. We ask questions, we don't get told, we don't get to see what the curriculum is, we don't get to have a say. And oh yeah, by the way, I should be able as a parent opt my child out if I don't want them to have exposure to that. And that's my exercising my rights as a parent. So I think that's very important. And that for some reason it seems to cause a lot of friction because we forget that the parents, the children belong to the parents, not the educators.
We've actually hit on your second of your priorities of the basic education levels of reading, writing, arithmetic, math, and science. Arithmetic and math, the same thing.
Yeah.
You actually have a granddaughter that goes to Chatham Central, and I think one of the things.
No, Chatham Charter.
I'm sorry, Chatham Charter. That's correct. Would you mind telling us what age that's in? And you also mentioned you had a discussion with a teacher at Chatham Charter and how Chatham Charter approaches educating children.
Yeah, I will. So my granddaughter just started kindergarten. So that's why we just said, okay, we're going to get involved right now. I want to know what's going on. I want to have some say. I want to understand what parents feel, what teachers feel. And we've even started, my wife and I started tutoring as we can fit it in. But we're as we get through life, we're going to do a lot of that because we feel we need to be involved in that because, again, we want to see that children like my granddaughter, very smart, and we work with her all the time, that they have that kind of tutoring and help if it's needed. But to your point, so I talked to a teacher there, and it was interesting because I talk to them every time I go there. When I go and I volunteer and do some things there at the school. I said she was a teacher. She'd been a teacher I think 20 years in Wake County in public school, and that was her first year that she was at Chatham Charter. And I said, well, how do you compare the two? She said, well, I was going to retire because I couldn't take the pressures that were going on in the public school system. She said they were on her all the time. They'd come in and say, hey, you need to change your thought process, focus on these things, and very political type of topics. And then she came to Chatham Charter and she said, I just came, I was out there at the summer, and they said, hey, you just teach your class. That's what we want you to do. We don't want you to bring any dogma or political messaging in. You just teach. I think she was a science teacher, if I remember correctly, and she taught even like criminal science, which is really kind of cool. But she said, we just want you to teach your class. Teach the topics that are in your class and focus on that. And she said it was the most relieving thing she ever did. She said, I was going to quit teaching now. I really love it. The other thing that they say that is different there, and maybe because it's a little bit more competitive to get into Chatham Charter, and if you don't, I guess, do the things that need to happen from an academic or behavior perspective, they've got a lot of people on the wait list, right? she said that the parents are very involved. They're helping. They're helping in in basically the administration of the school. They're helping with tutoring. They're helping with all the tools and things that they need, that the teachers need. I think if we bring the parents in and get their voice in, you're going to see that a lot more. And it's interesting because I've heard many times educators, and certainly in the public system, complain that there's not enough parent involvement. Well, if you shared what you're teaching and shared what you're trying to achieve with your teaching and your curriculum, maybe the parents will want to get more involved, right? So that it's a two-lane road, right? If you just shut them out and then wonder why they're not involved and don't want to get involved in the school, you haven't shared anything of what you're trying to do and what your curriculum is with the parent. So, and I think that's kind of the difference in that charter format. Parents are very involved, have a say, very much involved in the curriculum, and they feel very supported. The teachers do from the parents.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because Taylor's Academy that opened up in Pittsburgh has a similar type of attitude towards that. And the reason I say it's interesting is because we've had several stories in the Chatham Journal, and stories that are actually several months old every once in a while keep on popping up as trending. So there seems to be interest in a traditional academic excellence type of curriculum.
Right. So that's the other thing, Gene. So we don't have to go reinvent something. Those charter schools, those private schools, they've been achieving academics for years and years, much higher than the public school. So then we have to ask ourselves, what are they doing different than the public schools doing different? Well, number one, they're not pushing a political agenda or social reengineering. They're very focused on academics. As a matter of fact, they pride themselves in what they're trying to do academically. And I think that's where the difference is, right? So if we're over here trying to deliver social reengineering, social messaging, and not focus on academics, well, on the charter and private school hour, that's all they're about, is about dealing and trying to get education and academics across to the students, and they're achieving much higher levels.
Yeah, one of the questions I think someone had, one of the groups out there had asked you is what role should social issues like race, sexuality, and gender play in the classroom? And I think your basic response was, you know what, we need to be educating kids of whatever status to be the best that they can be academically.
Absolutely. And before I had it, you had it in your school. We know where our fallings are in history. We know what happened historically, and we need to teach that. Not like to gloss over it or change it, but it needs to be taught. But we can't make social engineering the focus of what we're trying to get from our schools. They will get, trust me, they'll get social engineering at college. We all know that, right? It's everywhere in college. But at least get them through the K through 12 where they can communicate. And yes, if they have a social voice that they want to go do, it'd be good if they could write well and express themselves well. And the only way they're going to get that is if they have the academics, right? So we need to get that. That's what we should be focused on, K through 12, academic achievement. We'll call it ethics. We'll call it philosophical. We'll call it social engineering, if you want to call it that they could get into college because they're going to see that. They're going to have that. That's really the place for that kind of discussion. And everybody, I've even heard them say, well, we don't do CRT. Well, you do if you just call it something else. But you're right, the people said it. It's a college course. It's a college discussion because that's where you're kind of developing that level of your mind that says, what's going on? How can I influence the world socially? K through 12, you got to learn communication, the ability to write effectively, the ability to put your ideas down, to be able to manage the mathematics that we have in our life, everyday life, right? It'd be good to get out of high school and know what you're signing for when you sign for a car loan or you're working out a mortgage. If you're not able to do that, it's going to be hard to be able to provide for your family.
So it seems you're saying academic excellence, concentrating on the fundamentals, is the way that you build a pathway to success to your future life here in Chatham County schools.
Absolutely. We get that academic level up. We will be able to do the things that we want. It's great we have these companies coming, but if you don't have a way to channel your workforce to get there, they're going to bring people from the outside. Just like I said, the chicken plant brings buses every day from Greensboro, right? We need to be able to have that kind of workforce that we've developed internally within the county. We draw these people in, and you'll hear it all the time. We love to see our youth stay in the area. But if you don't give them that opportunity and where they are competitive, they're not going to be able to. They're going to have to leave.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Your third priority, and let's touch on this, is how we're failing our young people in school with, substance abuse, school violence.
Yep.
think a few weeks ago there were a couple of parents fighting in the parking lot of Northwood High School. That's
Yep.
like adults being adults, really.
Yeah. So you got Marcus coming in here in a little bit. He's a candidate for the sheriff, and we were talking the other day, and I said, you realize some of the most dangerous places in our communities is our schools. Some of the most violent actions that happen on a daily basis is our schools. What has happened, right? So again, and that's due also because our youth feel like they're lost, right? Teenage suicides up fourfold in the last 10 years. Fentanyl overdoses are over, I think, 10 times as much as they were 10 years ago, and opioids for that matter. We are losing our youth because they don't feel like they have a direction in life, right? And if you don't give them the skill sets, they're going to get out. They can't get a decent job. Guess what's going to happen? They're going to revolt to drugs or self-abuse. We need to focus that, and that needs to be another element. If we're going to bring in, we'll call it consultants, rather than working on social engineering, let's work on mental health. Let's start identifying some of these students that we can already see, and teachers should probably, if they don't know it, we can certainly educate them. How do you recognize somebody that's in a self-abuse type of environment, or maybe some other abuse? How do we deal with that? How do we get some counselors in? How do we bring the parents in? Hey, just so you know, Gene, your son here, we see some things here that we're a little worried about. You need to pay a little more attention to this, right? So I think we can do that, but we have to focus on it, right? We are all about things that go on and violence in schools and things like that. Thinking, well, if we take away guns, well, it'll solve it. And I know parents have dealt with this before, and certainly we have. If there's somebody that's cutting themselves, right? You take all the butter knives out of that house. You haven't dealt with the problem, right? The problem is a mental problem, and we need that in those schools because we see it now. The numbers are there. We have mental health issues in our schools. We need mental health experts in a way so when a teacher says, hey, I see a problem, I see Jimmy's got a problem here, goes to the principal says, I know exactly who to call. We'll call up our mental health team. They'll come in, we'll bring the parents in, we'll start talking about it, we'll meet on a regular basis, see if we can find out what's the cause, why does he or she feel that they don't value or they don't have value in life. We need to start dealing with that young age. If not, the problem, as we see, is going to be in their lives, and we'll be living it every day in the headlines.
I think I'm about ready to wrap up.
Okay.
Was there anything else that you needed to let the folks, I mean, we've been talking about 40 minutes. Is there
Right.
anything else you feel that the folks who are watching this need to know?
Well, I will tell you this. I'm not doing this for I have no political desires in the world. If I have no job or no role, no position that I'm going to go to after this that I say, hey, maybe this is my stepping stone. There's none of that I even care about. I care about the youth. I see a lot of problems in this country. Now, I can't fix all of them, but if I focus on the youth in this county, I think we can make at least a change in this county, right? You look what happened in other counties. Just a few people getting involved makes changes, right? So I'd like to see that happen in this county. Also, I will say that I'm pretty tireless when it comes to focused. I'm razor focused, and I'll meet with any teacher. I'll meet with any parent, and that's the other thing I think that our current board lacks, right? There's this. I don't know what the right word is. I guess it's kind of an elitism, where we have people come up and they express their ideas, they pour out their hearts, and no response. Now they can say, okay, we can't respond because we got to keep our board. But if I'm on that board and they only have 10, so I can handle 10, right? I can handle 20. If they say something, I'll say, make sure we get your email. I'll respond to them personally, every one of them. Now, I may not be able to agree with them. I may not be able to do what they say or do something about what they're concerned about, but they're going to hear from me. I'm at least say, hey, I looked into this. You're right. This is a problem. Maybe we can put this on for the next year, whatever. But I'm going to address every single one of them because that's a response. They're elected officials. That's the public. That's who their boss is, right? And certainly parents and the taxpayers are the bosses of the Board of Education, and that's who they need to respond to. Our board doesn't do that. Okay, that's nice, next, right? And no response. We can't do that. That's not how we operate as a community. If people have issues, they have concerns that need to be addressed, and at least that, okay, I heard what you said. I can't do anything about that, or I'm limited in what I can do, but at least I say, I appreciate you coming in, and I appreciate you voicing what you need. And every one of them will get that from me.
So when you make your response to a parent after, and let's say you send them an email, that parent may represent an X amount of folks that feel the same way. Is that
Right.
a response that you just send privately to that person, or is that a response you send and also make public on the school website?
I think that person should have that choice. I would give them that choice. I can put this on the website and post your question, and you can see my response, or it can be private, and that's up to that individual. I won't share that person's information without their permission because I don't think that's right. We have that right in the freedom of speech. But if they say no, I'd rather it stay private, then I'll just correspond with them. If I ask them and they say, "Are you okay if I put this on the website as a response to the question you posted?" and you feel comfortable with that, absolutely.
All right. You're not a politician. You're running because you want to make a difference here in the Chatham-centric world of Chatham County.
Yep.
You made the decision, but I'm sure you didn't make the decision without talking to your wife.
No way.
So tell me how that went.
Because we've been talking about it for quite some time, and actually, I've been working with our party trying to find candidates. I'm a precinct chair for my area out here, and to be honest, and this is me being absolute honest, I was really hoping in our community of Siler City, well, at least the city is over 50% Hispanic. I was really trying to find a Hispanic candidate that would take that on. We don't have any Hispanic representation on the Board of Education. You may not know this, but as far as I know, unless things have changed, I don't think we have any Hispanic representation even on the city board. So I feel that they needed a voice, and I was working hard. I had a guy, I almost had him. I said, "No, I'm not quite ready." And it got close to the end line. I said, "Well, somebody's going to have to get involved in this. Somebody's going to have to make changes." And when you say that, and then my personal feeling is, well, if I can't find somebody, I need to be that person. I'll be that voice. I'll get on there. But I still feel that, and I'll feel that even if I get elected. I said, "Hey, maybe I'm holding this position for the Hispanic person in our community that needs to come on." And that, Gene, is a big injustice that we have in Chatham County. You talk about problems we have in Chatham County. Our Board of Commissioners and our Board of Education are voted at large. So that means everybody in the county votes for them, right? But I'm out here in west of Siler City. I have to be from here, but I could get elected with not a single vote here, and the rest of the county voted for me, and I could win. And that's just not right, right? Same way, I could get every single vote in this district and not get any votes, and I won't get elected. We need to change that, and I've asked our current candidate, Walter Petty, to propose that motion. We can't have that. Now, if you want to have maybe the chair of the boards or something, that's fine. But if you're from that district and you have to be in that district, only you should represent that district. That's like, it's like taxation without representation. These people out here, and by the way, that's a big issue. West Chatham doesn't feel the same love as East Chatham because we don't have those kind of, if you go to the Board of Education, they tout, Northwood and Seafoam, and I think those are great schools. But these schools out here, if you look at the scores, are the ones that are most challenged. Chatham Central and Jordan Matthews. We need to look at the entire county, and if I represent this area, I'm going to have a voice on that board for this district, right? So I think that needs to be changed. That is an injustice, if you will, for both the Board of Commissioners and the Board of Education.
Last question. Having lived in various countries, you're multilingual, is that correct?
I speak Spanish, yeah. And a little Italian.
A little Italian, there you go. All right, folks. Hey, that wraps it up with Tim Moore. His wife was checking in, keeping an eye on me to make sure that I was doing this right. Look, if you like, or even if you don't like what Tim's talking about, feel free to share this with other folks. Let them know that it's out here. We've had like a 45-minute discussion. I think it's a little bit more in depth than some of the questions that you may, question and answer things you may see out there. Tim, thank you very much for doing this.
I appreciate it. Thank you.